I want to thank everyone for coming out this morning. I know getting up early in the morning for a briefing isn't necessarily the first order of business, but appreciate nonetheless for this very serious topic that we'll be discussing today. I want to introduce myself. My name is Nathan Sampson with the Office of Congressman Gus Bilirakis, who is co-chair of the International Religious Freedom Caucus. And as we have today a briefing on the CCP's persecution of the Falun Gong. Just an outline of what our event will be. We have a esteemed panel of people that can speak, experts in their own right on the persecution that the CCP has against the Falun Gong and personal stories from that. And then after we do that, we'll have an opportunity for some kind of questions that anyone might have and talking about engagement of what are things that Congress can do or continue to do or do better as it relates to this persecution. So starting with our first panelist, it will be Mr. Xiao. Mr. Xiao, I think, was or is a constituent of the congressman down in Florida, but he is a software engineer and a YouTuber currently living down in Florida. He has personal experience with the Chinese persecution of Falun Gong. His father recently, Daeyong Zhao, was detained in 2021, extrajudicially detained, and only just recently sentenced to 8 years in prisons, strictly for his beliefs. Second panelist is Simon Zhang. He is an architect that lives in Brooklyn. He as well has suffered under the persecution of the CCP for his beliefs and eventually was able to move to the United States, fleeing the CCP's persecution 10 years ago. Tragically, his mother died in custody of the CCP for failing to renounce her beliefs in Falun Gong. Our third panelist will be Lydia Wang and her brother, Stephen. They live in New York. Miss Wang is a tailor, and her brother is a principal dancer for the Shen Yun Performing Arts. Miss Wang was forced to flee her hometown because of her beliefs, but not before the CCP was able to break her family apart. Our fourth speaker, or panelist, is Miss Nina Shea, who's senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. She is also the director of the Center of Religious Freedom that she ended up founding. She has fought for religious freedom and in defense of those persecuted for their beliefs for 40 years. She has served as commissioner to the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, being appointed 7 times from 1999 to 2012. And she has been appointed as the U.S. delegate to the United Nations Human Rights body. She's also been an author or co-author to 3 books on religious persecution and genocide, and writes on international religious freedom concerns in the Wall Street Journal, National Review, and other outlets. With that, I'd like to give the floor to you for his statement.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I want to thank Congressman Bilirakis for organizing this event. My name is Xiao. I'm a software engineer and also a YouTuber. My grandfather died last year. I couldn't go to the funeral because if I go back to China, I will be in jail. My father could not go to the funeral because my father was already in jail. My family believe in Falun Gong, following the principle of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. Ever since the CCP started persecution in 1999, millions of people have been put into prison, labor camp, and brainwashing center just because of their beliefs. Many were even persecuted to death. Back in 2012, my mom, who is sitting over there, she was put into brainwashing center for more than 1 month. She was caught by the police while she was delivering booklets on the street just to clarify A booklet is just a piece of paper like this, printing the material about the persecution of Falun Gong and what CCP did in history. My mom is a very brave woman. When she was in China, she went out to deliver booklets almost every day. And now she protests at the Chinese consulate in New York every day. My father, on the other hand, is not active. He never went out to deliver the booklets like my mother. He knows he has to protect the family. When my mom was in brainwashing center, my father grew a lot of white hair in just several days and lost a lot of weight. 10 years ago, my mom was behind the bars, and my father was trying his best to save my mom. And 10 years later, my father is behind bars. My mom and I are trying our best to save my father. In December 2019, my parents came to the state to visit me. Because of the COVID, their return flight got canceled. In October 2020, my father decided to go back to China, while my mom decided to stay in the States. In April 2021, my father was arrested. On the same day, more than 10 Falun Gong practitioners were arrested in the same time in the same city. The local police want to make it a very big case, and they deem my father as the so-called organizer. And last month, my father was sentenced to prison for 80 years. And in the final judgment, it says, my father is the accomplice of my mother. Since my mother is on the run, there is no distinction between the principal offender and the accessory, thus sentencing my father to 8 years in prison. There were a few moments when I felt so overwhelmed and so desperate. They have unlimited power, they have unlimited money, but look at me, I'm just nobody. In the darkest time, Congressman Bilirakis and Senator Rubio have given me tremendous help. I would appreciate forever. Congressman Bilirakis has written 3 letters to presidency, and Senator Rubio has written 2 letters to the State Department. The second letter is co-signed by 8 Florida legislators. Back in 2021, the local Chinese police denied my lawyer's request to meet my father. I told the local prosecutor's office that my Congressman Bilirakis has written letter to presidency, and then my lawyer finally was allowed to meet my father. It shows how international support can make a difference. I am a software engineer, but I'm also a YouTuber. My channel has more than 210,000 subscribers, and I am among the top 3 Chinese-speaking military channels on YouTube. Many of my audience are actually from the US or Taiwan military. And recently, I published an episode talking about what happened to my dad, my family. It has more than 120,000 views now, and many people across the world encourage me. I started this channel to fight against the disinformation war, and I will keep fighting for my father's freedom, and I will never back down. My father was already 62 years old. He has lost all his teeth. He cannot eat meat, he cannot eat vegetables, or even rice, because he cannot simply bite. The only thing he can eat is buns soaked in soup. So please help my father and help the people under the persecution in China. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, Yu. Next, we have Simon.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, everyone. My name is Simon Zhang. I am an architect in New York. I'm here to share with you the story of my mom. Her name is Yun. I wish she could speak for herself, but she passed away last March in detention center. No, in detention, in hospital in my hometown in Mongolia, simply for practicing Falun Gong. Since the persecution of Falun Gong started in 1999, she was sent to forced labor camps twice, first in 2001 and then in 2008, right before the Beijing Summer Olympics. Both times she received severe maltreatment. For example, in 2001, in the forced labor camp, she was tortured by police with electric batons for 2 hours until she had an involuntary urination, and her face was burned. That torture destroyed her health, but the abuse did not stop there. Both times, we were only allowed to bring her home when she was about to die, due to severe torture and abuses. In 2022, she was arrested again on Chinese New Year, 3 days before the Beijing Winter Olympics. She was arrested because the police ransacked my parents' apartment and found Falun Gong books. In detention center, she went on a hunger strike to protest the arbitrary detention. The guards responded with torture, forced feeding, and humiliation. As a result, she lost consciousness and was sent to hospital, where she was handcuffed to bed for the last month of her life. They also placed iron fetters on her ankles. On March 21st, 48 days after she was arrested, my mom died. My father demanded an explanation but was only met with indifference. Instead, nearly 50 policemen guarded my mom's body and monitored my parents' apartment. On April 7, my mom was cremated. My father was forced to give permission after police threatened to have my cousin, who is my father's close nephew, fired from his government job. They also threatened that my father to see a photo of me joining Falun Gong events in the United States, telling him that they know everything. My mom had one strong wish to see for herself how people can practice Falun Gong freely in America like what I do now. A few years ago, she planned to visit me here in the States, but her passport application was denied because she practiced Falun Gong. Now she would never have that chance. In the 65 years of her life, the last 23 were filled with surveillance, harassment, arrest, torture, and abuses. My entire family also suffered for 23 years because of this. All she did was to stay faithful to the principles of Falun Gong, truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. She refused to give them up even in the face of physical and mental torture by the communist regime. I remember back in 2007, my mom was sent to hospital because of a seizure after being harassed by the police. In the hospital, my cousin asked her, "Can't you simply keep quiet and practice at home without distributing the truth to people? Look how much you have paid for." In a very weak voice, she said, "I can't. I have benefited so much from practicing Falun Gong. I can't keep quiet when Falun Gong is defamed so badly." Here you might have noticed that her 2 recent arrests both happened before the Olympics. It has been a common operation for the communist regime to harass or arrest Falun Gong practitioners on so-called sensitive dates. Typically, those dates are related to special events. For example, July 20th, the day the persecution officially launched in China, Olympic Games, when the world is paying more attention to China, and the so-called National Congress, where about 5,000 CCP representatives get together in Beijing, and the CCP wants to show how harmonious China is. My family is only one of the millions of families torn apart by this persecution, and my mom is just one of over 4,900 documented cases of Falun Gong practitioners who died due to torture and abuses. Another number of Falun Gong practitioners, likely hundreds of thousands, have been killed through forced organ harvesting. Their persecution is happening to Falun Gong practitioners all over China. As you have heard and will hear, the 3 cases we present here happen in 3 places that are far away from China, from each other in China. This persecution is much, much bigger than China's human rights issue, which we commonly hear on media. It is a genocide, in my opinion. What the CCP has done to Falun Gong practitioners is a genocide and a crime against humanity. One measure I think is very efficient in helping stop the persecution is sanctioning officials involved. The U.S. government has already sanctioned a few individuals that are responsible for some cases of persecution, and it really worked, according to fellow practitioners' reports from China. Many police or officials were scared after they heard about the sanction. because if sanctioned, their children cannot come to United States for education, and they cannot emigrate to U.S. after retirement, and possibly they could lose their money that's put into U.S. banks. These things are very popular among officials in China. So I would urge the United States government to impose more sanctions on individuals that have participated in the persecution. This will save more lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. Next, Lydia. And also, the mic can be annoying. So.
Thank you, Nathan. Good morning. My name is Lydia, and my younger brother, Stephen Wang, is here today. Thank you to the IRFC and the representative Belarakis for giving me the opportunity to share my story with you all today. This was hard for me to write, but my mother, she is in detention, and we need your help. My family started practicing Falun Gong in 1996. We were happy trying to be good people, but everything went down here when Jiang Zemin ordered the persecution of Falun Gong. Soon after, the police came to our door. Despite our cries, they attacked my father and took him to detention, where he faced physical and mental abuse. Next, my mother, Ai Hua Liu, was arrested. This marked the beginning of a cycle of 11 arrests and detentions. Our once happy family would never be reunited. After repeated abuse in detention, my father died following his release in September 2009. Meanwhile, my sisters and I were also harassed. My younger brother Stephen went to the U.S. in 2008, joining Shen Yun Performing Arts as a principal dancer. When the CCP found out, they began targeting my family more, claiming that Stephen was a threat to national security. After my father's death, the police interrupted my wedding ceremony with demands for information about my brother Stephen. I refused to say anything, but the pressure continued to rise. In 2011, I visited my mother on maternity leave after the birth of my first daughter. Police trespassed into the house and demanded the news about Stephen. However, I still didn't say a word. The policeman then threatened to jail and torture me if I did not speak. He even told me it would be a shame for your baby to grow up without a mother. Excuse me. Next, the Ministry State Security Police came to the school where I was teaching and questioned me for hours. Afterwards, my mother was arrested again. My ex-husband worked for the CCP, and his boss was the former 6th office head in our district. His boss threatened to fire him unless I was sent to a brainwashing center. Under pressure, my ex-husband tried to force me to give up practicing Falun Dafa. At the time, I had just found out I was pregnant with a second baby. When I told my ex, she was frightened we would lose our jobs because of the one-child policy. He told me to get an abortion. She even blackmailed me and took my daughter away from home on Children's Day. I did not see my ex or my child for a month. I only knew two things. I would not give up my belief, and I would not give up my baby. I decided to visit Stephen in New York during summer vacation. I hoped by giving my ex-husband some time to think, he would change his mind. However, The situation in China only got worse. My mother and sisters advised me not to come back. In November 2012, my mother was arrested again and was sentenced to 4 years in Guangdong Province Women's Prison. A few months later, I gave birth to my second daughter by myself in New York. My mother and our family remained separate. Our family remained separate, and in 2017, a year after my mother Aihua was released, we thought this was the final chance to reunite for Stephen's wedding. However, she was denied a passport because she practiced Falun Gong. Our mother was sentenced to 3 years. Missing my brother's wedding and the birth of Stephen's son. This year, my mother was sentenced to 4 years in prison by Liuyang City Court and is being held at the number 4 detention center of Changsha City. She has suffered for 24 years under the CCP's persecution and has been in prison over 10 years since 1999. My sisters asked to see my mother many times, but the court-appointed lawyer refused to help them. There is no hope for justice in China. Even if my mother was allowed fair representation, changing the court's predetermined verdict is impossible. I do not know when this persecution will end. I do not know if I can see my mother again. As long as the persecution of Falun Gong continues, my mother remains at risk of further harm if she stays in China. I request your assistance in securing the release of our mother. We would like to bring her home to New York. Please also ask the U.S. ambassador to China to raise my mother's case, inquire about her condition, and call for her immediate release. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that powerful story. Next, we have Ms. Nina Shea.
Good morning. And I also want to thank Congressman Bilirakis and the International Religious Freedom Caucus for convening this important hearing. The CCP brutality against Falun Gong is one of the world's most unrecognized and serious episodes of religious persecution and possible genocide in the world today. And I just want to make 3 points because of time. And the first is that the evidence, mounting evidence, supports mass atrocity and even religious genocide. And this includes an intent to eliminate Falun Gong by President Jiang Zemin in the past, which kicked off an effort to establish a bureaucratic instrument to do so, that's known as the 610 office, at both the national and provincial levels, and the near complete suppression of 70 to 100 million Falun Gong practitioners inside China. And this was accompanied with mass arrests and detentions in labor camps and beatings, torture, horrific abuse and deprivation in detention, as we've heard today, and it still continues. Disappearances and deaths in custody with absolutely no independent oversight or investigation. And around the same time that this was all happening, the world noticed that there was a booming organ transplant sector arising in China, and family members of Falun Gong started supporting their suspicions that that this sector was supplied by organs from Falun Gong detainees who were killed to order for their vital organs. It's a perfect crime because there are virtually no survivors. However, there has been much reported on it and well-documented statistics and data and analysis by scholars and human rights experts and scientists. Even UN special rapporteurs have documented the fact that Falun Gong, as well as some other religious minorities who were able to be freed from prison, had their organs screened and their blood samples tested and entered into a government database in a way that's consistent with organ transplant preparation. The second point I want to make is that the CC persecutes Falun Gong here in the United States. And this has been going on for quite a while, for many years. But this year, the FBI arrested 2 Chinese agents who brazenly opened a police station in Manhattan to persecute Falun Gong here. And this is according to the April 5th indictment by the Department of Justice. And these Chinese agents stand accused of conspiring to act as China's agents and to obstruct justice. And Falun Gong is cited 13 times in this indictment. It is part of the CCP's obsessive worldwide crackdown on Falun Gong. The House previously has passed a resolution that lists some of the resolution way back in 2004, House Congressional Resolution 304, condemning CCP's oppression of Falun Gong both in the United States and China, and lists some incidents that occurred here of assaults and threats against Falun Gong by CCP agents on American soil. My final point is that the State Department has been negligent. Despite detailed documentation to the contrary between 2006 and 2014 by esteemed human rights advocates as Canadian Member of Parliament David Kilgour, the late David Kilgour, and human rights lawyer David Mattis, and journalist Ethan Gutman, the U.S. State Department made the sweeping and unwarranted finding in its 2018 Human Rights Report that, quote, in January 2015, the government officially, that is the Chinese government, officially ended the longstanding practice of involuntarily harvesting the organs of executed prisoners for use in transplants. The State Department's source for this claim was one Wang Jiafu, whom it identified merely as a former health minister, but also who served, as when mentioned, as a longtime member of the CCP Central Committee, according to the Carnegie Endowment for Peace. And Wang was authoritatively quoted in this 2018 State Department report, saying that Beijing had zero tolerance for forced organ harvesting. And this was simply propaganda. The report of the State Department this year, which was issued this spring, failed to mention that in April 2022, the Board of Directors of the International Heart and Lung Transplant Society barred its members from supporting, participating, teaching, joint research, or submission of data at meetings with China's transplant sector, singled out China's transplant sector due to ethical concerns regarding voluntary donation, transparency, and lack of public scrutiny of its donor lists. And Wang Jiafu, by the way, is head of the so-called voluntary donor list. So in 2015, China acknowledged that it had used prisoners for their organs. They were killed to order for organ transplants. These prisoners most reputable human rights experts believe were prisoners of conscience, and first among them has been found to be Falun Gong. The tide is turning somewhat. The House passed this spring a bill 1154 to stop forced organ harvesting act. It's now in the Senate. China was singled out in that, and it needs to pass in the Senate. But there's also the problem of another advance has been the resolution by the International Society of Heart and Lung to ban its members from participating in this hideous practice in China. But this needs to be restricted at a national level. We need to do it across the board to prevent all all organ transplant medical institutions and hospitals, universities from participating in this atrocity in China. And the State Department must act to do that forthwith. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. So now we're moving on to a question and answer phase. I don't know if any of you guys have some questions, can let you sit and think about some. But I did want to kick it off by asking, obviously we're here in Congress, or a Congressional House office building. From the panel's perspective, what are, and I know that Nina touched on it a little bit, what are some actions that Congress can take outside of the ones that they've taken with the Prevent Forced Organ Harvesting Act to help put more transparency on the perpetrators in the CCP that are doing this, or to prevent, let's say on the United States side, and protect citizens from that CCP's outreach. And for this, if you'd like, I can recognize you, you can come speak, or if you'd like, you can speak down at your seat. It's up to you. For the question.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you want me to... Well, there's a lot more that the United States and Congress can be doing. I think there should be a real focus on what American medical establishment, the transplant sector, is doing in China, the amount of funding, the training of transplant surgeons. There's documentation of over 300 transplant surgeons in China that we have helped train. There are conferences, joint research projects, general funding, specific funding. This has to stop, and it needs to have a spotlight shined on it. So I think that there should be hearings calling up the universities and hospitals, Harvard, for example, University of Pittsburgh, Stanford. These are proudly displaying on their websites that they have joint projects with China's transplant sector. This sector is, from what I have seen, the reporting, meticulous reporting about the numbers of transplant centers, numbers of hospital beds, the lack of transparency on its donors, and the low number of donors, voluntary donors for organs in China, indicate, there's strong indication that there is other sources, namely prison sources still being used for transplants, and this has to, and because there's no opportunity to have an independent verification of China's word, we can no longer believe China's word. We've seen that during the COVID pandemic. China has created a loss of faith around the world in its own explanation for its lack of data or failure to share data on the pandemic. It's just further evidence that China cannot be trusted and it needs to be verified. So I think that there could be hearings. The Senate should be pushed to pass this bill. And I think that the individual prisoner cases, it's very important to raise the names of the family members who are in prison or who have died in custody. We have those names. During the Cold War, the United States was absolutely relentless, and Congress was relentless in raising those names in every international and bilateral meeting with the Iron Curtain countries and the Soviet Empire, and it helped. It helped free those people. It helped save lives. It helped eventually delegitimize Soviet communism, and I think that we need to do the same here.
And with that said, I do want to put a plug for hopefully I'm getting this right, the Congressional Executive China Commission has a political prisoners database, and I don't know if you'd want to briefly talk about that.
Yeah, I'm John Lee Blum. I work for the we have a political prisoner database, but
we don't have enough staff to comprehensively put in and keep up with all of the cases. So my question was going to be, do Falun Gong practitioners have or could they create a database for Falun Gong practitioners that is searchable, easy to find who's in there, what the credible reporting sources are for sources of information? That could be credible news reports, court cases, whatever. That would be very helpful, I think, because our database, like I said, the Xinjiang Uyghur cases, for example, the Uyghur advocates, they have their own database that has far more cases than we have the time and staff to put into ours. So maybe that's an idea that if it doesn't exist, maybe it could be done.
I do believe we have a database. So there is more than 4,000 people, documented people with name, with the event has been persecuted to death. But the real number is bigger than that. Yeah. So definitely we can share the database. Or some can work together on this.
Actually, we do compile a list of people sentenced to prison every month. And we do not have a database per se, but we do have it in Excel sheet form. So definitely I'd be happy to share them with you.
Kind of going off of that, I'm the main coordinator for Congress for the Defending Freedoms Project, which is the advocacy program for prisoners of conscience. And we have some overlap with that database as well as with the USERF political prisoner database. But for us, we just kind of have select cases that are more like emblematic, that we have members of Congress advocate for. So I just wondered if there were any particular cases currently that you were aware of that you thought were particularly needed a significant amount of awareness at the moment.
Well, we've heard of some today, so I'd leave it to Falun Gong to highlight the most urgent cases, but it seems like they're all fairly urgent because the deprivation and abuse and torture is so bad in detention. It's hard to whittle it down, which makes my point that this is one of the most unknown, egregious human rights violations in the world today. And we do have to make these names known and the cases known. So we'll be in touch with lists.
Also, I would like to recognize my boss, the co-chair for the International Religious Freedom, Congressman Xiao.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I wish I could be here for the whole panel discussion because this is very interesting, and also it's really important that we protect this wonderful religion and do everything we can for not just the people that are in China, but the Americans that. And I don't know if Jung is here. Is you here? Oh, there he is. You. Yeah. This is a great friend of mine and an outstanding individual, and I've gotten to know him very well. And he's got a wonderful family, and it's just a tragedy what happened to his father. So I'll go ahead and get into my prepared remarks. But you, I welcome you to come to my office, and you can update me on the situation. But we're not going to stop fighting on your behalf and others like you that just want to practice, their religion. And we have to be so grateful here in the United States of America, obviously, because we have the freedom of religion. But it's just unconscionable what happened to your father. And we're not going to stop. We're not going to stop. We're going to stay on the CCP. They have a long history, as you know, of using a variety of repressive methods as a part of a genocidal campaign to forcibly remove the people and culture of certain religious and ethnic minorities within China. The Falun Gong practitioners have been a prime target for the CCP, and you have a lot of supporters here in the Congress on both sides of the aisle. I think you know that, Falun Gong practitioners suffer from persecution, intimidation, censorship, and imprisonment, forced labor, torture, organ harvesting, and even death at the hands of the CCP, solely because of adherence to their religious beliefs. Deplorable. They are the main source of organs illegally harvested by the Chinese regime, and are particularly targeted for other brutal treatment and torture while being held in Chinese prisons, concentration camps, and detention facilities. It should never happen. This is not something that just affects people in China. As the panelists have discussed, and did you already make your presentation? Okay. As the panelists have discussed and others, this is something that has direct impact. It has a direct impact on the U.S. citizens and people living in the United States of America. Regarding the case of Yu's father, Dejan Yu, my letter on his family's behalf initially yielded positive response. Weeks after his imprisonment, the local government finally confirmed his imprisonment and formally announced his charges. I have continued to advocate on behalf of you and his family, and along with Senator Rubio and Senator Scott. And I think you probably know the whole situation, so I'm not going to describe the story. But again, you has been an outstanding United States citizen, and he cares about his homeland and cares more importantly about his people. Those of the Falun Gong religion. I've also been able to discuss this with the Congressional Executive Commission on China to get Mr. Yu's case added to the political prisoner database. I will work with the Commission to make sure that the other cases brought up today will also be added to the database to amplify the mistreatment of Falun Gong practitioners at the hands of the CCP. However, Congress and the United States must do more. We must do more. I'm glad my interns are here too. I'm sure you probably can't believe that this is happening today, in today's world. But it is happening, and we've got to do everything we can to prevent it from happening in the future. The United States and our allies must send a strong and unwavering message in defense of basic human rights and protections for all people. The right to worship and freedom of belief must be protected throughout the globe. And we have we're the leader of the free world, and we have an obligation and a duty to do this. No person should ever be intimidated, forced from their ancestral homeland, imprisoned, or murdered simply because of their beliefs. We should not shy away from holding China accountable for its human rights violations. This has been something I've fought for my entire congressional career, which is this is the 17th year, and I've been working with my chief of staff on this particular issue for a long time. Elizabeth Hitos, raise your hand, Liz. And we care deeply about this particular issue. So this has been something, again, that is very close to my heart. And as the co-chair of the Religious Freedom Caucus and as a member of the Executive Committee on the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, I was here when he presided over the Foreign Affairs Committee. He did a wonderful job, a great man. So I want to thank all of you. I want to thank the strong allies that we have in the House of Representatives. Now, we have a bunch of committee meetings, which I'm going to get right back to. This is how things operate up here. Just for the interns, no, we're doing a lot of things at once, but this is a priority for me and most of my members, the members on the commission. So, again, we will continue to fight for religious freedom and against religious persecution. My good friend, Chris Smith, he may be speaking today. He feels strongly about this particular issue. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Executive Committee on China and the co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. He has been a strong partner in speaking out against the CCP's persecution of ethnic and religious minorities. And also we have formed the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, as you know, has formed this select committee on China. And we've got to make sure that the Falun Gong is heard. And we'll make it a priority. And as you know, a good friend of mine, Ines Cantor, is doing everything he can to protect religious freedom and human rights around the world. And I work with him closely on these particular issues. So I recommend that you be in touch with him. If you have any, Nathan, who does an outstanding job for me, works on the foreign affairs. He has the information with regard to how to get a hold of Ennis, because he would be a great spokesperson for you. So I'm proud to co-sponsor the bill, Chris Smith's bill, to stop forced organ harvesting, the Act of 2023. I was also proud to co-sponsor the Falun Gong Protection Act introduced last Congress by Representative Scott Perry, and will be an original co-sponsor when it is introduced this particular Congress. I will continue to work with my like-minded colleagues to get these bills passed into law. Thank you again to the panel for being here. Thank you for the stories. Your stories are so meaningful to us. And then again, your advocacy, and everyone who has attended for helping raise awareness to the brutal treatment of Falun Gong under the CCP. Thank you so very much, and we've just begun to fight. We've got to help these wonderful people. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Congressman. So we do have still some few minutes left. If we have some more questions from the audience for the panel. If not, I have my own. So, we've talked about things that the United States can do, but obviously, as we've seen, the CCP is working to grow its power, not only just domestically, but through international organizations. What are things that I guess the United States, but more particularly the international community, needs to be taking more seriously when it comes to the CCP and their infiltration of international organizations to, push their agenda, which, first and foremost is, persecution of Falun Gong?
That I think China's propaganda has seeped into the international community, and I really don't put a lot of faith in that. Of course, the international transplant associations need to be pushed and even forced to develop ethical standards against forced organ harvesting. We've had progress with the International Society of Heart and Lung, like I mentioned in my statement, but I think that really the United States needs to be the world leader on religious freedom. That's a role that we've historically played, and we cannot give it up now. This is a basic issue that's part of our history, our traditions, our laws, our Constitution, the very first guarantee in our Bill of Rights in our Constitution. So the United States has an important role, both because it's a leader on religious freedom worldwide and because it is a superpower and the world listens. So I think that it's extremely important that the State Department Act and the administration, and also now particularly the Senate with the Congressman, I see Pierre Tosi here from Congressman Chris Smith's office, formerly, who works on China with the Congressional Executive Commission now as director there. But the Smith bill it's to stop forced organ harvesting in the Senate, and again the administration.
I just want to add some comments.
Go ahead.
Nina mentioned the University of Pittsburgh. I live in Pittsburgh for 3 years, and I'm familiar with the UPMC, one of the biggest hospitals in Pennsylvania. So when I was studying at Carnegie Mellon, I met a doctor coming from China to UPMC to receive trainings. He is not a transplant doctor, but he's like a bone surgery doctor. But he told me that his colleague in China doing the kind of like transplant surgery, that they harvest organs from prisoner of conscience, and sometimes the patient family, before the surgery, they even let the patient family to see, okay, you see he is alive, and then
Getting fresh organs.
yeah, fresh. You mean the organ is fresh. But in the American medical community, there is a lot. Before the COVID, there is a lot of cooperation with the Chinese hospital. I don't know if that exists now since the COVID changed everything, but I just want to raise aware of the issue that in the medical community, it's not only the medical, also the economical aspect. Maybe that's a little off the topic, but I want to talk about some of the software like TikTok or like the Temu. You know, the Temu is now the top 10 app download on the software. It's actually owned by a Chinese company called PDD. PDD has a history, and actually this year PDD is, if my memory serves, because I don't quite remember correctly, PDD is kind of banned by Google Store because the data breach or something like that. I need to confirm that because my memory may be a little blurred. But it shows how the Chinese company can, China is across the Pacific physically, but it's not that actually because it's now in the U.S. land. So, and back to the persecution of Falun Gong, I know a lot of practitioners are harassed by the CCP. I'm from Florida, Tampa, so like 20 years ago, one of the organizers of the Tampa Falun Gong, he received a call from Beijing, and the Beijing, like the security, told him that I went to Tampa, I went to your practice, I take photo there, so you better to stay silent. Otherwise, basically, the Chinese police surround him, and there is also 2 practitioners' home. Their home are broken in by someone, and nothing valuable is lost. It's only their laptop. It's in Tampa like 20 years ago. You know, these things happen on the U.S. soil. So, but the FBI is aware of this issue, but the case is unsolved because. But you know who is behind that. So this kind of thing is happening here.
Can I just add one thing to what you said? Yes, the CCP is international. It's not contained to Chinese borders. And Nathan, as to your question about the international community, WHO, the World Health Organization, created a task force for advising on best practices and organ transplants and against organ trafficking. And this was the creation, the idea was given to them by Wang Jiafu, the CCP operative from the Central Committee, according to the Carnegie Endowment for Peace. He's identified as being a member of was a longtime member of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. Was not only quoted in the State Department Human Rights Report for their establishing that the practice has ended of forced organ harvesting from prisoners, but was the man who brought the idea for this committee of best practices for organ transplants to WHO, and was appointed by WHO to be on this task force. And he put his friends also on the task force, a doctor from Harvard, so a transplant doctor. So we have to be very, very cautious about any kind of statement that this has ended and that there is assurances from our medical institutions. We have to verify this, independently verify.
Thank you.
Nathan, has there been, maybe for the panel, the ambassador for religious freedom, have you all had any contact with them under President Biden? Under President Trump, we had an ambassador for religious freedom, and he was very, very active. So I'm not sure. Are you aware of anyone that has been appointed by this administration? Have they been active or made any progress?
I know that they have been active on the Uyghurs, but I'm not sure. I don't see any evidence of progress on the Falun Gong situation. Congressman, I made the point that this is my statement today that this is the world's most unrecognized, serious human rights violation. One of the world's most serious, unrecognized human rights violations and possible genocide.
Yeah, it's despicable. It really is.
Yeah. I know that we got started slightly late and we're a little over time, but we'll allow one more question if you...
Sure. There was some allusion to this, but not super directly. When there's, for instance, this, police precinct set up in New York, are relatives back home in China used as leverage against Falun Gong practitioners abroad as a way of sort of coercing them from distance?
That's a very common practice. I'll give you an example. There's a lady called Anastasia who is a Jewish speaker. Okay. There is a lady called Anastasia who is Miss Canada, 2017 or 2018. So because he spoke publicly about the persecution, about what CCP did, her father was actually harassed and I don't know if it's under arrest, but it's controlled by the CCP for a while. And when she's